The third week of quarantine has officially started for me over here. As someone who would usually spend most of his time outside the house, mainly because of work, these past few weeks have definitely had some low points. And if on one side I've been enjoying the extra free time that I've got, on the other side I've got to work from home, and finding the motivation to be productive from home is not always easy. So today I've decided to share with you a couple of tips on how you can be more productive in quarantine, and hopefully this will be helpful for all of you who are forced to work from home. My first tip is to wake up and go to bed at the same time as you did before quarantine. I believe that one of the hardest part of this quarantine situation is that we're being forced to change our habits, and a sudden change in our routine can really have a negative impact on how we feel, on how motivated we are, how productive we are. I personally wake up at 7:30 and go to bed at around midnight so that I can keep my 7 hours of sleep just like I did before quarantine. On a similar note, my next tip is to eat at the same time that you were eating before quarantine. I've personally been struggling a little bit with this, especially at the beginning of quarantine, having breakfast super late, lunch at like 4 p.m. Now I got back to a more balanced eating hours, and I feel that I'm more energized and I can actually sleep better. I think that we can all agree that your eating habits actually affect a lot your sleeping habits. So if you feel like you're not sleeping very well, it could also be that you're not eating very well, or that you changed when you eat as well as what you eat. My next tip is to make your bed as soon as you wake up. At the beginning of quarantine, I would leave the bed as it was, and I felt that it was somehow sort of like attracting me to go back to bed. I realized that the fact of actually making the bed, it makes you realize that, okay, it's not sleeping time anymore, it's now time to actually work, and you're not attracted back to bed, back to sleep. Also, if the bed is in the same room where you work, it creates some unnecessary clutter, which can have a negative impact on how productive you feel. The next tip is to actually change clothes after you wake up. One of the things that I've been pretty bad at is to spend the whole day in my pajama, and I've realized that actually changing clothes do have an impact on how productive I can be and how motivated I can feel to actually work. And that's because my brain has always associated the pajama to being in bed, to sleep. So if you spend the whole day in your pajama, unconsciously you're telling your brain that it's rest time, that you possibly want to go to sleep, that you want to rest instead of actually doing some work. Of course, there's no need to dress up as you would to go to work, but you can definitely have a set of comfy clothes that you can put on after you wake up. So this way you have a clear separation between your sleeping clothes and your working daily clothes. My next tip is to not work in bed and actually sit down at a desk to do whatever work you need to do. Similar to my previous tip, your brain usually associates bed with rest, sleep, even the fact of laying down is a position that we associate naturally to a position of rest instead of standing up, which is more of an active position. So if you bring your laptop to your bed, you have more chances of actually not feeling that motivated to work and being more prone to rest and sleep. Also, working in bed can have an extra negative effect. If your brain starts associating bed with work, you could actually find yourself having some troubles falling asleep, because then when it's time to sleep, you may actually want to work. So it's very important that you separate bed from work. My next tip is to define a clear work area in your house. In my case, for example, I have temporarily changed my kitchen table to my work area. Whenever I need to start working, I clean the table up and I make sure that I have everything I need close to me so that I don't need to actually stand up and go look for things. The idea here is that you want to have sort of like a desk, just like you would at work. Whenever you go there, you actually have everything you need to be productive, and you'll feel more like at work instead of just being at home. My next tip is to have a clear plan for the day. This can be applied even out of quarantine, but I believe that right now it's even more important to have a plan since we have so much free time that we can spend on things. A pretty effective way to do that, it's either in the morning or the night before. You can write down a to-do list of what you'd like to achieve either the same day or the following day. So once you sit down at your workspace that you have clearly defined, you have this list of tasks and it'll guide you on what to do next so that it'll be easier for you to actually do the work you're supposed to be doing. My next tip is to put all distractions away, ideally in another room. The reason why I chose my kitchen table to be my work area is because I know that in the kitchen I don't have my Switch, I don't have my games, I don't have a lot of things that can distract me and put my attention away from work. And as for your phone, if it's not 100% necessary for your work, just put it in another room. My next tip is to not take time for granted. One of the things that I've been struggling the most is that even though I do have my work area, I tend to start working way later than I would normally. I tend to procrastinate and just tell myself that I do have the time to do the work that I need to. So by taking time for granted, something that usually would take me 30 minutes ends up taking 1 hour just because I'm allowing myself to spend this extra time. And I've realized that this can actually have a pretty negative impact because it makes me feel like I'm not being that productive, that even though I'm there, I'm supposed to be working, everything seems okay, I'm actually not working that much. Let's say, for example, you need to read emails and usually it takes you 30 minutes. Now it takes you an hour. And if you apply that to every single thing that you do, you'll end up feeling like you're actually not that productive and that you're actually wasting your time, even though you do have a lot of time. So just tell yourself to not take time for granted and at least try to do things as you used to before. My next tip is to take advantage of the extra free time that you've got to learn a new skill or work on a creative project. This is possibly the best aspect of this whole quarantine situation. We can actually get a couple of extra hours per day, especially if you're not commuting to work. And this time, instead of going wasted, can actually be used to do something meaningful for you. And I truly believe that doing something meaningful with your time does have a huge impact on how motivated you feel and on how productive you can be on other aspects of your life. So for example, in my case, developing my game actually makes me feel good about the way that I'm spending my time, and it gives me motivation for my main full-time work that I still need to do while in quarantine. If I weren't working on game development, I wouldn't get that satisfaction that I get from being productive on my game, and that satisfaction actually has a big impact on all the other work that I have to do. I mean, everything is interconnected. You can't really separate different aspects of your life, right? So if one aspect has a very big positive impact on the rest is going to be affected by that positivity as well. My next tip is to work with a friend. Of course, since we are in quarantine, we can't see our friends, but we can definitely call them. And one of the things that I've really been enjoying a lot is to do either video calls or just calls, during which I work on my own thing and my friend works on his or her own things. And what happens is that even though most of the time we're not even talking, the fact of having this social support can have a big impact on how productive you feel. Just with your regular job, most likely you work with other people. And usually if you are in an environment where everyone is productive, you'll feel productive too. So if you've been feeling lonely, not motivated, not productive, just find a friend that you can work with, call each other and see how you can both be productive at the same time by somehow being closer to each other. And on this note, I hope that you guys found some of these tips helpful. I hope that you all are safe, that you're not going crazy because of this whole quarantine confinement situation. I wish you all a very productive day, and I'll see you in my next video.